jump into some warm-ups. I think warm-ups are a good thing. But what types of warm-ups are the best, or what type of warm-ups are needed? Some questions that we're gonna dive into. Joe, I know you have some good things to talk about cardiovascular warm-ups. So yeah, let's just get it going. So we'll start with the first one, cardiovascular warm-ups. So specifically, when we're talking about cardiovascular warm-ups, the main thing we're trying to do is elevate the heart rate, trying to get some blood flowing in the body. So there's not like besides the circulatory system, there's not a heavy focus. I mean, a little bit of our to bring up our heart rate to increase our breathing rate, respiratory rate. So by the time we do start exercise, we are breathing heavier and able to get blood to muscles quicker. So that's kind of like the idea. The standard is the typical 5 to 10 minutes on a treadmill, 3.2 miles per hour, which is actually interesting because there is a study that was done that said a walking person walking with intention is walking at 3.2 miles per hour. So 3.2 is typically 3.5, somewhere in there, if your clients or athletes can handle that speed. And then it's typically a treadmill. I mean, very rarely do you think like putting a person on a different piece of equipment, unless it's cardio equipment. I mean, obviously bikes and ellipticals, but if we're going like what mainstream is, it is treadmill. So what do you guys think? Cardiovascular warm-ups, good, bad? Like what should we keep them?
Yeah, I would say that for the general population, it's a little bit different than the regular, your more experienced, advanced athletes or whatever it is. For the general population, your elderly especially, you do a whole lot with their bodies. Let's say that. At least not at the beginning of the training period. I would say that would be probably the ideal. When we worked together at Cox, I mean, that was one thing that I definitely saw, like the difference between the population that I was used to always think and the population that we work with. So I think
Totally.
I was also going to mention, I think some people think cardiovascular warm-ups are better than other types of warm-ups. And I would argue that no matter what you're doing, if you are able to cardiovascular, so we're talking about the heart and the veins and the arteries pumping more blood, right, more heat. If we're getting more blood flow, no matter what we're doing, even if it's you're on the treadmill, on the bike, whatever you're doing, when you get a higher temperature up in your body, there's a thing called the Bohr effect. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but essentially when you get your body weight up, your body heat up, my bad, you basically, your hemoglobin and your myoglobin in your different tissues, whether it's in your blood cells or in your muscle, they tend to release oxygen from that hemoglobin, myoglobin more efficiently if you get your temperature up. So that's the most important thing.
That's a good point. And a lot of people probably just think, oh, so I'm just supposed to get my heart rate to 110 and then start exercise. But honestly,
Right.
if you can keep your heart rate at that, whatever your target heart rate is for your warm-up, it's going to make the Bohr effect way more effective. So, okay, so like, would you say we should maybe do a different type of cardiovascular warm-up than just walking to maybe make the Bohr effect more effective, or is that fine as long as the core temperature is increased?
Well, I think my argument was that as long as you're getting the core temperature increased, no matter what you're doing, it's going to activate the Bohr effect. So people need to be realizing maybe it's not so much there's a right and wrong way to warm up, but you need to be increasing your body temperature slowly and consistently up until you're ready to start your actual workout.
Gotcha. Okay. Because I definitely think Joe's made this argument. It's stupid to do cardiovascular warm-ups because if we're going to do any sort of sport-specific exercise or exercise in general that's targeted towards the muscular system, then why would we do a cardiovascular warm-up when we can do a muscular warm-up and do the
Right.
same thing, increase my heart rate, increase my core temperature, increase blood flow to those specific stability muscles, main muscle groups before exercise. So that way I can start at, 60 or 80% of my 1 rep max and not feel overwhelmed or not have enough blood flow to that tissue and potentially have an injury. So I know Joe's made that argument before, but for general population, I definitely would suggest this. What do you
And
think?
this experience as well. Like I haven't done a cardiovascular warm up in probably like 2 years. I haven't had because of that. I mean, if I had an injury, was either because of tennis or because it was something chronic
Mm,
that was happening. That like, oh man, like I didn't warm up right, and then this happened.
that's a good point. That's a good point. It's normally due to the next one, musculoskeletal warm-ups. So, okay, so basically why would musculoskeletal warm-ups be important is kind of a good question because I've already done my cardiovascular warm-up. Why do I need to do a musculoskeletal warm-up?
Um,
Go
I
ahead,
I was going to mention real quick that one thing that cardiovascular warm-ups can't do very well is
Mm-hmm.
lower the viscosity in your joints. So the synovial fluid that's in each of your joints, if you're just walking on the treadmill, yeah, your knees, your ankles are going to be getting some, but are they going through the full range of motion? Oftentimes not. And oftentimes that joint viscosity or that synovial fluid that's still really thick, it's not warmed up. That isn't going to be hit effectively, whereas musculoskeletal warm-ups, I think, can lower that joint viscosity a lot.
So like naturally lubricate our joints with the sac of fluid that's already lubricating the joint in general.
Exactly.
So you're saying it's effective to warm up the synovial fluid before exercise?
Yes. And one of the main ways you can get that fluid moving throughout the whole part of your joint, and there's obviously tons of joints in the body, a lot more than what you're going to be using with just treadmill walking. You need to be using that joint through its full range of motion.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
and the main issue here, or the main benefit of doing the musculoskeletal warm up. I mean, you can name it. I mean, I divided between core mobility, SMR, which is self myofascial release, and muscle activation. That's usually my three things. That so Aaron, you give the science background, I give the practical way to, and then that's what I just said. That's basically how it works. But so the joint mobilization. So if I'm doing squats, I'm always working on that ankle mobility, on that hip mobility.
Yeah.
On my new one is actually to be a rotation mobility. That's something that I just learned recently. Then I go into some, or before I'll do some foam rolling, which is self myofascial release, and do some of that soft tissue work, and then I'll go into the muscle activation. So I'll do some glute activation. I'll do some chest exercise, whatever is that first exercise or whatever I'm going to that day. Then I'm going to do some activation with some lighter exercises that really just help to get that muscle ready with more blood flow for that muscle specific, for that group of muscles.
Yeah, so this is gonna cover joints. Okay, so the synovial fluid, because we've mentioned that a couple times, that's how nutrients get in and out of that joint, is through that pressure gradient within your synovial fluid. So even if we increase the temperature here, so we have it more lubricated, so that way we can get nutrients in and out, if we're not working that joint through full range of motion, that pressure gradient won't be pushed. So that's why a musculoskeletal warm-up, easy one that I always do with a lot of clients, is external rotation with dumbbells of the shoulder joint to really warm up the rotor cuff muscles, and to get that focus, that muscle-mind connection to that area, which is actually the last one that I want to cover with you guys. And we can wrap up on this one. So psychological warm-ups. So muscle-mind connection is huge. So that's kind of part of like a musculoskeletal warm-up, but also, and I'll say this, and then you guys can mention anything on psychological warm-ups. The biggest thing I would say is if you're not ready for your sports intensity or your exercise intensity, then taking time during your cardiovascular warm-up will be really important to get psychologically ready to push your body to another limit. And so, especially if we're talking sports, there's different types of anxieties that we can talk about in like a later pod, but just specifically for maybe most of people doing exercises, I would probably say you just want to make sure your muscle-mind connection is there. You're ready to activate those muscles, and you have the ability to, and you're really ready for exercise. So, I mean, do you guys have anything on that?
Yeah, real quick, I was going to mention for psychological warm-ups, a good way to envision it is if you think about an axis, so like an x-axis, y-axis. On the x-axis is your arousal, and so you're trying to get your body aroused and ready for performance. And
Okay.
on the y-axis would be performance. There's different theories for how that should go, but a really common one is the inverted U hypothesis.
Okay.
So essentially, as you're warming up, you want your arousal to increase because your performance will increase as your arousal increases. However, only to a certain point does that, this is what the hypothesis says, does that arousal still benefit you? So you want to increase your arousal, get ready, get a little bit hyped to a certain extent. And so that's your goal with warm-ups, psychologically.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Joe, you got anything on that?
I there that I lack the most. So I would say that you guys have probably more experience. I just like to usually when I work out with my friends, especially you guys. It's like we get each other hyped for that workout.
Yeah, we peak.
Oh yeah,
we like peak like that.
And I think that's like, dude, you're just ready for it. Like you've been waiting for that. But on a daily basis, sometimes like it does get hard. So I think it's just the mindset is like, I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna give my best. And we could talk later about this, but I would say that like the way you program does affect a lot of how you get psychologically ready.
For sure. Okay, sweet. I just want to kind of jump into some warm-ups. Thanks for jumping on.